Alright, so here we are taking a look at our beautiful Pirouette with PowerView window shading. And what I want to take a look at here is, number one, before I start covering up that fabric covered headrail, if I can, and protect that fabric covered headrail in any way possible. What we're looking at here is the motor end of a Pirouette shade, and Pirouette does have a very small manual button here on the end of the shade. You push it up into the shade here, and it's very small. Understand that the edge gaps for each side of the Pirouette shade are the same, so there's no motor gap on the motor side of the shade for the Pirouette product at this point. So understand that that motor control here is up above the top of the shade. So it mounts up towards the top of the window. That's good. Understand, if I have to replace one of these, all I have to do is remove the end cap just by coming from the back and flexing it off towards the front. Remove the end cap. There's two Robertson drive screws here on each end of the motor here, and I want to go ahead and undo those Robertson drives. But before I do that, there's this Torx here located on the wire retainer for Pirouette. I've got a little Torx drive here. We'll bring it way down into it. So that's a Torx. My little flathead here actually fits that, so I can get that screw undone very easily there, so I can slide this around. I want to get this to where I can slide it around before I start removing the motor. Now I can go ahead, I don't usually work on these with power tools, but I am for time's sake for our video here. I'm going to go ahead and remove the two end screws here off of the end cap. Little Robertson drive screws there, they fly away. And now I'm going to go ahead and hold onto the fabric roll with two fingers, hold onto the headrail here, and slowly work out the motor out of the end of the shade. And you can see I've got this flat little spindle here. This spindle is all that's got that whole shade writing on it going through the motor housing. So here's the motor housing here, here's the spindle on it. What I want to do is slightly pull it back and then begin to pull that interior rail, that interior tube, out of the spindle here. So as I'm working the motor out, I'm keeping an eye on this inner tube here, making sure it stays in the shade. I don't want the other end of the shade to become disengaged. That'll be a separate video if I do that. So if I come over here, work the motor out, the motor's out of the end cap, out of the headrail here, I want to slowly slide the wire retainer out as well. I don't want to go ahead and try and take this all the way out too far. I'm going to get the wire retainer out and then go ahead and remove the motor the rest of the way. And the wire retainer is really the toughest part. So the wire retainer's out. Going to go ahead and hold on to that interior tube. Everything stayed engaged on my limit end of the shade here, so everything there stayed in place. I've held it in place. What I can do now is bring in my new motor. Here's the replacement motor here for whatever reason again. And I want to understand that this feature needs to go in before the whole motor goes in, but I can't just go ahead and put it in and then put the motor in. This wire retainer needs to go in. So I want to go ahead and put the motor in. The motor's only going to fit in essentially one way. It's got these features here that line up on the interior feature of the shade there. Going to drive that into place, drive it on down. This idler, doesn't matter where it fits into the shade, so I can go ahead and work that on before I start putting everything all the way in the shade. The other thing to understand is the wire retainer fits into the features here on the end of the headrail. Try and move that back there. Slide this feature in, and I want to slide it in and get it in there pretty good. I want to watch out for right here, there's this pointed feature of the rail there that sometimes wants to grab that end of the wire there. So that could cut it if it was very sharp at that point. I've got my wire retainer in place here. Gonna look at my interior idler there. It is inside the inner tube there. What I want to do is bring this around and slide it onto the end cap without pinching the power wire in any way. And I got to make sure that my retainer is in far enough for this to fit on there. And it does just fit right in. Make sure the wire's not pinched anywhere. Cool, look at the clear end cap there. Go ahead and return my number 1 Robertson screws in. Go ahead and get those started. Drive them in with a drill. Don't recommend really ramming stuff in with a drill, but we're going to do it for video here. Go ahead, put that in. Return my aesthetic cover on. Beautiful. I would use a mounting bracket to space this over. I could put it right next to the end of the shade here. I want to watch out where that wire is going to end up and use up that wire inside there. Then I can take my flathead screwdriver here and tighten down my Torx. I want my Torx pretty tight because if it sticks up pretty far, it could gouge into the top of the window. So I want to make sure that that's nice and tight and in place there. And then I want to make sure my fabric is coming around behind the limit here. Now we're going to go ahead and lower this shade and fix that here in a second. What we're going to do now is power up our shade. Pop our battery wand in, powering up the shade here. And we'll go ahead and give it a little operation. Button press here on the side. And now we can get that fabric in behind the shade. And you can see the shades opening and closing. I can do a 6-second reset and reset the limits for this shade. It's opening down at the bottom down there. Run it closed. And you can see I've got operation of my Pirouette shade. That's replacing the PowerView motor on a PowerView with Pirouette shade.